Coming up on today's show, Mel Kiper has released his 2025 NFL draft grades, and I'm excited to share insights on all 32 teams with you. But first, a quick reminder. While ESPN Plus costs $120 a year, this content is completely free, so make sure to subscribe for more Atlanta Falcons updates. One of the best and sometimes silliest traditions we have is analyzing NFL draft grades. Every year, we eagerly dive into every draft grade video and article, even though we have no idea how these players will pan out. So let's take a look at what Kiper thought of the Falcons draft. To recap, the Falcons made some significant moves. They selected Jalen Carter, an edge rusher from Georgia at 15, traded back into the first round to grab James Pierce from Tennessee, picked up 2 defensive backs later on, and added Jack Nelson, an offensive tackle from Wisconsin. Kiper gave Atlanta an A grade, which I thought was well-deserved given their draft strategy and the talent they acquired. However, he also handed out a lot of B grades, which seems to be his go-to to avoid harsh criticism. Interestingly, the Falcons didn't appear in the initial grades, but they were one of 2 teams to receive a C grade alongside the Bengals. Let's break down Atlanta's draft and discuss why Kiper rated them as one of the 2 worst teams in the 2025 NFL Draft. A stark contrast to my own view, which leans toward an A grade. I know I'm a bit biased as an Atlanta Falcons enthusiast, but I genuinely believe that the first 3 picks could all be starting by mid-season. That's something not many teams can claim from this year's draft. Kiper noted that the Falcons found value with their first pick, stating that Jalen Walker was ranked 10th on his board. He graded Walker as an off-ball linebacker, praising his sideline-to-sideline speed. However, the Falcons plan to use him as a traditional edge rusher, which is an important detail. In my opinion, Walker is best suited as an off-ball linebacker who can also rush the passer, similar to how Caden Ellis is utilized. At 6 feet 1 inch and 243 pounds, Walker is on the smaller side for an edge rusher, which could pose challenges against larger offensive tackles. I believe he would be better served as an inside linebacker, allowing him to play alongside Troy Anderson while also rotating with James Pierce and Arnold Ebiketie. I can only imagine how excited Georgia fans are about this pick. If you're one of them, hit that thumbs up button below. I often receive comments from people claiming connections to these players, saying things like, "Hey, that's my cousin," or "We went to middle school together." It's great to see the community rallying around these young athletes. Kiper also pointed out that the Falcons used their first 4 picks on the defensive side of the ball for the first time since 2009. While I appreciate the focus on defense, I do wish one of those picks had been aimed at the quarterback position or perhaps a defensive tackle. The key reason I have concerns about Atlanta this season revolves around their decision to trade away their 2026 first-round pick. Let's unpack the trade the Falcons made for a moment. They jumped back into the first round, moving from pick 46 to pick 26 with the Rams, a leap of 20 spots. In exchange, they received pick 101 while giving up a 7th-round pick, which I consider inconsequential, and that future first-rounder. So essentially, Atlanta moved up from 46 to 26, giving up a first-round pick next year and gaining a 3rd-round pick this year. This trade is risky for the Falcons. It could easily be viewed as an overpay, especially when you consider the previous trade made by the New York Giants, who moved from pick 34 to 25 and only had to give up 2 third-round picks. They covered about half the distance that Atlanta did, yet they didn't have to sacrifice a first-round pick. When you look at trade value charts, which assign numerical values to each draft pick, it becomes clear that the Rams came out ahead in this deal. The only way for the Falcons to emerge as winners in this trade is if James Pierce becomes a significant contributor, ideally a player who earns a second contract with the team by consistently racking up 7 to 9 sacks in his first few years. If the Falcons end up picking around 26 next year, they essentially traded a high pick for a lower one, which wouldn't reflect well on their decision-making. However, if they give the Rams the 27th overall pick next year, it would mean they only move back 1 spot in the first round while also moving up from 101 to 46. In that scenario, the Falcons would have gained James Pierce, which could make the trade more palatable. Now, a bit of background on Pierce. He's a speedster at 6 feet 5 inches and 245 pounds. The Falcons' strategy of selecting both Jalen Walker and Pierce as their first two picks highlights their focus on speed at the edge rusher position. Raheem Morris has a clear vision for his defense, one that emphasizes athleticism and quickness. We saw this approach in free agency when they signed Devin Diablo, a safety who transitioned to linebacker. There are pros and cons to this emphasis on speed. On one hand, speed is a game changer. You can't teach it. On the other hand, while speed can be effective in college, it doesn't always translate to the NFL. In the pros, edge rushers face offensive tackles who are just as quick, making it harder to rely solely on speed. This could lead to a drop-off in performance for players who thrived in college by simply outrunning their opponents. In contrast, power is a trait that tends to carry over. If you can push back offensive linemen in college, you're likely to do the same in the NFL. So that covers Atlanta's first two picks and Kiper's assessment of them. Now let's take a look at the other selections the Falcons made and see what Kiper thought. But before we dive into that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the James Pierce selection. What do you think? When it comes to trading back into the first round for James Pierce, what do you think? Do you like the pick? Give me a yes or a no in the comment section. Personally, I'm on board with it. I was a bit uneasy at first, but if Pierce performs well and the Falcons finish with a record around 9-8 next year, landing somewhere in the 20s for their draft pick, that could turn out to be a solid selection. Even if it's not exactly 26, getting Pierce at 23 would still be a win in my book. Now, if you're interested in a Jalen Walker jersey, since he's the first Georgia player selected in the first round in Falcons history, check out the link in the comments and description. We also have a James Pierce jersey available for all my fellow Tennessee Volunteers fans. It's a great way to support the channel while showing off your team spirit. Back to Kiper's analysis. He noted that cornerback was the second biggest need for the Falcons, right behind edge rusher. Interestingly, Atlanta focused on safety, selecting Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman, both of whom have proven to be ball hawks. Since the start of the 2023 season, Watts led the FBS with 13 interceptions, while Bowman tied for 7th with 8. The good news is that the Falcons plan to use Bowman as a nickel corner rather than a safety, which will be interesting to see unfold. Watts, on the other hand, may not be the most athletically gifted safety, but he has great instincts and ball skills, making him a good fit for the position. Bowman is more physically gifted, but there are concerns about his tackling ability. As a nickel corner, solid tackling skills are crucial, especially when covering larger players like tight ends. The Falcons are willing to give Bowman a shot, and while he has good instincts, he wasn't heavily relied upon in coverage during his time at Oklahoma. This transition will be a work in progress, and I wouldn't expect to see much of Bowman in 2025. With Clark Phillips and D. Alfred already established in that role, it would be a pleasant surprise if Bowman quickly adapts to his new position. Now, let's take a look at how Atlanta's draft was graded across various media outlets. Bleacher Report gave them a B, while Tom Downey from Chat Sports assigned a B-. Pete Prisco at CBS Sports also gave a B-, and Kiper himself handed out a C. Dane Brugler, who ranks teams rather than giving grades, placed Atlanta at 30th overall, not great by most standards, but I gave them an A, so I'll stick to my guns on that one. To wrap up today's episode, let's do a quick wheel spin to show some love to those who generously supported us with super chats during the NFL Draft. Thank you to everyone who tuned in for our live coverage. Here we go. Let's spin the wheel. A special shout out to Andre Holiday for going above and beyond with his support. Everyone, let's give a round of applause for Andre. Thanks again, and I'll see you all later.